Hello, my name's Marie Fahy and I work at Aid to the Church in Need and I'm the Resources Officer. Today I'm going to be reading from God Speaks to His Children, ACN's Child Bible. The chapter I'm reading today is chapter 84 and it's entitled Peter Denies Jesus. The abductors arrested Jesus and led him away to the house of the high priest. Peter waited for a while, then followed at a distance. A fire was burning in the courtyard, and Peter sat down among those warming themselves. A maid saw Peter and recognized him. "Aren't you one of those who followed Jesus?" Peter denied this and said, "I do not know him." Soon someone else recognized him. "You're one of Jesus' disciples." Peter denied it again and said, "No, I certainly am not." About an hour later, a third person said, "You were with him. You also come from Galilee." Peter insisted, "I do not know what you are talking about." And at that moment the cock crowed, and Peter remembered what Jesus had said to him earlier. "Before the cock crows in the morning, you will deny me 3 times." Peter stood up and went out. He wept bitterly. Have you ever felt let down or betrayed by somebody? Can you imagine how Jesus felt when Peter, who was one of his favourite disciples, his closest companion, let him down and betrayed him when he needed him most? Before I worked at Aid to the Church in Need, I used to be a teacher. And I remember a girl, I'm going to call her Anne, and she had lots of friends and was always involved with everything in the school and was a lovely, friendly girl. And there was another girl who I'm going to call Fiona, and for some reason she just spent a lot of time on her own and found it difficult to make friends. And one day, Anne took it upon herself to go to Fiona and to say, "Fiona, do you want to join me and my friends? I've noticed that you're on your own, and why don't you join our gang?" And so from then on, Fiona was part of Anne's group of friends, and it was great to see she became very happy at school and they all got along famously. One day it was raining very hard and there was puddles outside of the classroom, and I wasn't there at the time, but I'm told that Anne fell over in a puddle and she was all wet. All the side of her hair was wet, she had mud on her uniform, and she was in a really bad way when she fell over. And sad to say, some of the older children thought it was a bit funny and sort of pointed at her and started laughing. And Anne looked at Fiona as if to say, "Help me." And Fiona laughed and joined in with the older children making fun of Anne as she was on the floor needing help. Now, I know from talking to Anne afterwards how betrayed she felt. I also know from Fiona, from talking to her afterwards, that she said she just made the wrong decision on the spur of the moment and she wanted to impress the older children and she hadn't really meant it and she felt really bad about herself. And just like Peter in the story we've just heard from the Bible, she was crying and she was so upset with herself that she'd let her friend down. So, what do we learn from this? What is the passage telling us? Well, I think it's telling us something about ourselves and about other people, firstly. It tells us about ourselves that we sometimes make the wrong decisions. Sometimes we don't stand up for what is right. Sometimes we let other people down. And just like Fiona and just like Peter did, we have to go back and we have to put things right when we make mistakes. Sometimes other people hurt us badly, and when that happens, we need to turn to Jesus, because Jesus is the person who is always by our side. He is the one person who will never ever let us down. Hopefully there'll be loads of people who'll never let us down, but if there are, Jesus is always there for us. He is the best friend we could ever have. So let us remember, in times of difficulty, in times when people that we trust let us down, we can always turn to Jesus. God didn't hold what happened with Peter against him. Later on, Peter became the first pope. And now Peter, the same Peter who denied Jesus 3 times, is a saint in heaven. Now this should make us really happy, because we can think, when we do things that are wrong, when we do things that are bad, if, like Fiona, if like Peter, we come back to Jesus and say sorry, if we go to confession, and if we ask for God's help, we too can have a great future for us and do the thing that God has chosen us to do in this life. So I'd like you to just consider a few things as you discuss what we've just been reading about in this story from the Bible. The first thing I'd like you to think about is, how does it make you feel to know that Jesus is always there for you? How does it make you feel to know that you have got a best friend who is in heaven, who died for you and who will do anything for you and who will never leave you? So that's your first question. Secondly, is there a time that you have let somebody down? Did you ask them to forgive you? Do you still need to ask them to forgive you? And how did it make you feel? Were you like Peter? Did you feel bad afterwards? And what can that teach you in the future about how we treat other people? And lastly, I'd like you to consider whether or not you are willing to stand up for what is right. In that moment, Peter gave in and he didn't stand up for Jesus. There's plenty of opportunities for us in our lives to stand up for what is right, to stand up for our faith, to stand up for our belief in God, to stand up for justice, to stand up for poor people, to stand against religious persecution. All of these things, we're going to have multiple chances in our lives. So how ready are you to stand up for what is right? I hope you enjoyed this reflection, and I hope you enjoyed discussing those questions. Thank you. Bye.